Alright, so we've got the Poland band How Could It Be stems from There Is Nothing New Under the Sun Volume 2. Now these stems are from the record, so you'll be hearing the exact parts that are actually in the song recording. Now there's a few things I should point out from the beginning. First, the stems are already mixed and EQ'd, so this is not a video about how to do that. I mixed this song, I EQ'd everything, and flattened each part into a stem. So that's what we're going to be listening to here. As we get into the individual instruments and other bonus videos, I will be using raw files, and I'll show you some EQ tips and tricks and overall ideas for individual instruments, but that is not this video. Now, because we're working with flattened stems today, you may notice that the drum track, for instance, has all of the different drum tracks flattened into a single stem. For our purposes today, you will not see a kick track and a snare track and a hi-hat track, etc. Let's go ahead and listen to the drum track quick. Now, if these were raw files and I was mixing the song, there would likely be anywhere from 8 to 14 different drum tracks. For instance, I use 3 different mics on the kick typically. I use an in, an out, and a sub mic, and then 2 different mics on the snare, top and bottom, plus a hi-hat mic, a mic for each of the 3 toms, 2 overhead mics, and a room mic, and sometimes the room mic is a stereo XY mic. So right there you have 14 different channels or tracks. In this video, all of those tracks have been summed to a single stereo stem. Now, along with that idea of summing different tracks together, I should point out that even the lead vocals stem has a second vocal baked into it. Let's listen to that part here.
How could it be that we can't do is offer up to set me you?
Again, that has already been mixed and EQ'd, and there is no separating them at this point. Not that we need to for this video, but it's kind of interesting and worth pointing out. Also, the backing vocal stem has 2 different channels or tracks baked into one stem. Let's go ahead and listen to that.
That the King of all glory hung on a tree and died for me.
And 3 more things to quickly point out about the specific song and stems that we're listening to here, and then we're going to dive into the Worship Pi application. You may notice that we have a multitude of vocals stem. Let's go ahead and listen to that quick. For the There Is Nothing New Under the Sun record project from Poland band, we wanted to make them feel more alive, and so we went through and added what we call a multitude of vocals to each of the songs. Now, this is not normal, but it was kind of a fun way to make the songs feel a bit more organic and less overly produced. And that way, I think what we have here sounds more like what you would hear in a typical church service than many other studio records, but typically you wouldn't have something like that. Now, along with that, I want to point out something really quick that would make pulling off this particular arrangement of the song a little more difficult for the average worship team. You can see here that we have 5 different electric guitar tracks. We can look through each of them a little later and talk about what they are actually contributing to the song, but I want to just point out that the typical church worship team is obviously not going to have 5 different electric guitarists on the stage, and that's fine. Most of these guitars are not needed in a congregational worship setting, but they did make a huge difference in the recording of this song. Okay, the last thing here before we dive in. This song really does rely pretty heavily on a drum loop. Let's go ahead and listen to that loop. Now, I have led this song in worship with and without this drum loop, and I really enjoy using it personally, even in a live setting, but it is not necessary. However, the big thing to realize regarding the drum loop, and this is starting to get into the Worship Pi concept, is that how the drummer approaches the song changes drastically based upon whether or not you are using a loop like this. With the loop, you'll notice that the drummer barely plays. He basically comes in to make the chorus and the interludes huge and to build the bridge. If there were no drum loop though, the drummer would have to emulate that basic beat on the drums, which would mean that he is playing the whole time. So again, think of the Worship Pi concept. From just the drummer's perspective, if there is no drum loop, then he has the whole pie. As soon as the drum loop is added, however, the drummer needs to take a smaller slice of that pie. Okay, I think we're ready to dive in and see how the different pieces of this song all work together. So the song starts with a drum loop, which we just listened to, and this sets the rhythm and the tone for the song. It's a kind of fun groove that the other instruments are going to build around. Now, it's easy to want to start a song like this all at once, like maybe the drummer's like 1, 2, 3, 4, and everybody just comes in and starts playing, and that's okay, but that's not overly dynamic. So let's listen to this song build, starting with the drum loop. So you'll hear the song start with a drum loop, and then after 2 measures, the acoustic guitar will start strumming away. And then 4 measures later, the lead vocals come in.
How could it be that the King of all glory?
Now halfway through that first chorus, you're going to hear a high electric guitar part, and that is really just a foreshadowing of what is to come.
Could it be that the fullness of heaven?
Now if I were playing this song live, I probably wouldn't use this high electric guitar part, but then again, I wouldn't have 5 electric guitarists available, so I would have to be more selective about what parts need to be played and which parts do not. But notice how the song is building. Right now, we just have the drum loop, the acoustic guitar, and the vocals. On this last line of the chorus, we're going to have the backing vocals finally join in, and then everyone comes in nice and strong for the first interlude.
Oh, how could it be?
Alright, so on that first interlude, everyone came in for that big moment in the song. The drums came in nice and strong. All of the electric guitars are in. There is an obvious signature riff that's happening here on guitar 5.
Oh, how could it be? Who could imagine?
Electric guitar 3 is just crunching away. The other electric guitars are just playing some nice high-end counter melodies. Let's listen to all of those guitars together. Now let's look at the acoustic guitar. The acoustic guitar never really changes what they are playing throughout the song, and that's really important. A lot of times there is a temptation for a rhythm instrument like the acoustic guitar to really go hog wild during a bigger dynamic part of the song, like an interlude, for instance. But that's not really necessary. The acoustic guitar does not need to get bigger because everything around the acoustic guitar is getting bigger. The acoustic guitarist just needs to own their slice of the pie. So let's listen to different parts of the acoustic guitar here. Here's the intro. Here is the verse. Here is the chorus. Now let's go ahead and look at the piano. The piano is not really doing a whole lot in this song, mostly because there's not a lot of room left. For this particular song, the piano just has a tiny slice of the pie, but remember that every piece is just as good and important as the rest. So while we're talking about the piano, let's go ahead and jump to the big build in the bridge, because that is where this instrument really shines in the song. And let me just point out that the reason the piano really shines in the bridge is because they held back from overplaying for the entire song, which allows them to really offer a big moment in the bridge buildup. So let's go ahead and listen to that. Notice how the piano is matching the drum build on the toms with these half notes, and then it goes to quarter notes and just gets bigger. So the piano plays a chord leading into the bridge and just holds while the acoustic guitar and the lead vocals do the heavy lifting. Now even the drum loop is out of this part. On the recording, we have electric guitar 1 staying in and doing pretty much what it has been doing for the entire song. Electric guitar 3 is also continuing to crunch away with big whole notes, but it's not mixed very high, so it works. If I had 2 electric guitarists in my worship team, I would definitely want one of them to put the big power chord whole notes part in there. But if I only had 1 electric guitarist in my worship team, then I would probably just stay out of that part for the first 2 times through the bridge and then come in on that 3rd time through with these big power chords offering help to the piano. So let's go back to the piano for this bridge. Notice he stays out of the bridge for the first 2 times through, then comes in on the 3rd line with half notes that are actually matching the drum tom, so it's off beat, which is pretty cool. And then it builds to quarter notes that are working their way up the register to help build dynamics, and then back to a chorus that is just a little bigger than the other choruses. The piano is playing a dotted half note and quarter note pattern for the last chorus, with just a few extra note runs mixed in. And of course, this is the biggest part of the song, so it is a pretty cool part from the piano, and one that is able to get huge only because it stayed so small for most of the song. Alright, let's look at two additional pieces of the arrangement that I think might be kind of helpful. First, let's notice the bass guitar. Now, this is not a wildly complicated part, but it does utilize a pretty great counter melody riff that is happening at the same time as the electric guitar signature riff. Let's listen to that. And following that riff and the interlude, there is basically nothing happening on the bass guitar until the second half of the verse. So that's a really great practical dynamic build. And you'll notice that the bass guitar really builds into the chorus along with the kick drum. Once the chorus comes, notice how locked into the kick drum the bass guitar is. We'll talk about this a little bit more in the bass guitar focus track video, but the bass guitar's musical buddy is the kick drum. And you can really hear how the bass guitar is giving tonality to the kick drum here in this chorus, which is pretty cool. Now let's look at the backing vocals and how they add dynamics to the song. We have two harmony parts accenting the last line of the first chorus, bringing in that big musical interlude. They stayed out of the whole chorus and then came in on just that last line. Very cool.
Oh, how could it be?
The backing vocals stayed entirely out of that first chorus with the exception of the last line, and they're going to stay out of the entire first verse, then come back in for the whole next chorus, and then drop out for the next verse and come back in for the chorus. Then to help with the build of the bridge, we have the backing vocals staying out of the first two lines of the bridge and then coming back in as the music is building.
We can do is offer up ourselves to you.
And finally, let's look at all of these electric guitars. What are they all doing? Electric Guitar 1 is actually two different guitar parts summed together into one track, and it's just a high picking part that starts on the left and then doubles on the right. This track stays in for pretty much the whole song, getting louder in the big parts and more quiet again in the smaller parts. And this guitar is definitely not necessary for a live performance, but it did make the recording feel bigger and more lively. Electric Guitar 2 is a counter melody double of the signature riff. It is another part that is definitely not necessary for a live performance, but really makes the signature riff pop in the recording. Electric Guitar 3 is our big powerhouse crunch guitar, and when you have two electric guitarists available for the worship team, I always try to get one of them basically doing this part. It doesn't have to be high in the mix, and it should be played super simply. Think big windmill whole notes, but this part always makes a mix sound so much bigger. Electric Guitar 4 is actually a loop. And there was one part that I liked a lot in Electric Guitar 2, and so I literally copied it and pasted it pretty much throughout the entire song with a few exceptions. Now this is definitely not a necessary guitar to add to a live performance, but again, I felt like it gave the recording a little something extra, and I thought it really played well with the drum loop. And finally, Electric Guitar 5 is the main electric guitar part that most ears will instantly pick up when they listen to the song. But I want to point out a couple of things that I did when recording this part that I think are pretty cool. Obviously, there is the signature riff. For me, as an electric guitarist, I'm always going for a mixture of technical and musical. Too technical and it sounds pretty stale. Too musical and it just sounds sloppy. Now I think this part really struck a balance between those two options. It's not technically perfect, but I do think it's pretty musical. The delay here really helps the part to pop. Notice the palm muted string strikes in the verse. Kind of subtle, but cool. And the last kind of interesting thing that this guitar is doing is adding just a little bit of crazy to the bridge.